The black billionaire left his wife at the hospital to party with his mistress. Then everything changed. It started as the happiest day of her life, and ended with her alone in a hospital room, holding two newborns while her husband walked out the door. Nobody knew what she was about to discover. Stay with me. This gets unbelievable. Welcome back, friend. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from and which country do you call home? Drop it in the comments, I'd love to know. Today's story is one of heartbreak, betrayal, and the quiet strength of a woman who refused to be broken. It's emotional, it's real, and by the end, you'll understand what true love actually looks like. I won't tell you how it ends. You'll have to stay until the last word. She had waited 9 months for this moment, and now it was finally here. Amara Johnson lay in a private suite on the 14th floor of Grandview Medical Center in Atlanta, the city lights glittering through the wide windows behind her. The room didn't look like a hospital room at all. It looked like a suite in a 5-star hotel, with fresh white roses on the dresser, soft gold lighting, and a view that stretched for miles. That was the kind of life Marcus Johnson's money bought. He was one of Atlanta's most talked-about real estate developers, a self-made billionaire who had built an empire out of nothing but ambition and charm. And for 8 years, Amara had been the woman standing beside him. Quiet, graceful, devoted. Now she was holding the proof of that devotion in her arms. Twins. A boy and a girl born just 2 hours ago, wrapped in soft red blankets, their tiny chests rising and falling in peaceful sleep. She should have felt nothing but joy. But something in her chest felt heavy, like a stone she couldn't name. They're perfect, the nurse said, adjusting the monitor beside the bassinets. Absolutely perfect. Amara smiled, but her eyes kept drifting to the door. Marcus had been gone for almost 45 minutes. He said it was a work call. He said it every time. She thought back to the moment the babies were born. How Marcus had stood at the foot of the bed, phone buzzing in his pocket, glancing at the screen even as the doctor placed their daughter in Amara's arms. She remembered the flicker of irritation on his face, quickly disguised as a smile before the doctor could notice. She told herself she was imagining things. 8 years of marriage. 2 children. A man who had proposed to her on a rooftop in Paris with the whole city glowing beneath them. Surely that kind of love didn't just disappear. But love, she was starting to learn, could hide a lot of things. The door opened. Marcus stepped in, dressed not in the hospital gown he'd worn earlier, but in a crisp light blue suit, freshly changed. His cologne trailing behind him like smoke. "You're leaving?" Amara asked, her voice quiet, careful not to sound accusing. "Just for a few hours," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Big investor dinner tonight. I told you about it weeks ago. I can't miss it. Not with the coastline deal on the line. Tonight. Marcus, our children were born 2 hours ago." He crossed the room and pressed a kiss to her forehead, the way he always did when he wanted a conversation to be over. "I know, baby. You know. But this deal is worth $300 million. Think about what that means for our family, for them." He nodded toward the bassinets without really looking at them. "I'll be back before you know it." Amara wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that no deal, no matter how many zeros, mattered more than this moment, the first night of their children's lives. But she had learned over the years that arguing with Marcus was like trying to hold water in her hands. He always found a way to slip through. "Fine," she whispered. "Go." He didn't hear the crack in her voice, or maybe he chose not to. He picked up his black leather bag from the chair by the window, and as he turned to leave, Amara caught a glimpse of something through the half-open door. A flash of yellow fabric, a woman standing just outside in the hallway. Her heart stopped. "Marcus," she said. "Who is that?" He didn't answer. He simply walked toward the door, his shoulders tense, his pace quickening. The nurse, sensing the tension in the room, busied herself with the babies, pretending not to notice. Amara pushed herself up slightly in the bed, ignoring the ache in her body, straining to see through the doorway. And there she was, a young woman in an elegant yellow gown, her hair perfectly curled, a designer bag hanging from her wrist, standing just outside the door like she'd been waiting there the entire time. Marcus paused beside her for only a second. Just long enough for Amara to see the woman's hand brush against his arm. Just long enough for her world to tilt sideways. Then the door closed, and Amara was alone with her newborn twins, the monitor beeping softly beside her, the city lights blinking outside the window like they hadn't just watched her heart break. She looked down at her children, so small, so innocent, completely unaware of the storm already forming around them. "It's just us," she whispered to them, her voice trembling. "It's going to be just us." She didn't cry. Not yet. She was too stunned, too numb, her mind racing back through months of missed calls, late nights, unexplained trips. Pieces that hadn't made sense before suddenly began sliding into place, forming a picture she didn't want to see. Outside her door, in the marble-floored hallway of the maternity wing, Marcus Johnson took the woman in yellow by the hand and led her toward the elevator, already speaking in low, urgent tones about tonight's plans. Plans that had nothing to do with a business dinner at all. What Amara didn't know yet was that this night, the night her children were born, would become the night everything about her life quietly, irreversibly began to change. And somewhere deep down, a part of her already knew it. The hospital room felt unbearably quiet after Marcus left. The nurse, a kind-eyed woman named Denise, lingered a little longer than she needed to, checking the baby's vitals for the third time in 10 minutes. She could feel the tension still hanging in the air, thick as fog. "You okay, sweetheart?" Denise finally asked, her voice gentle. Amara nodded, though her eyes were glassy. "I'm fine. Just tired." Denise didn't push. She had worked in this hospital for over 15 years, and she had seen enough husbands walk in and out of rooms like this to recognize the look on Amara's face. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was the look of a woman whose entire world had just cracked open. "You call me if you need anything," Denise said softly, before stepping out and pulling the door shut behind her. Alone now, Amara allowed herself to breathe. She looked at her children. Her daughter, whom they had already named Zuri, had a tiny tuft of dark curly hair and long lashes resting against soft brown cheeks. Her son, Malik, slept with his small fist curled beside his face, utterly at peace with the world. They didn't know their father had just walked out the door with another woman on the night they were born. Amara reached for her phone on the bedside table, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened her messages. There, buried between old conversations, were things she had brushed aside for months. A calendar invite to a dinner that Marcus had deleted almost immediately after sending. A hotel receipt from 3 weeks ago that she'd assumed was for a client meeting. A perfume that lingered on his jacket once, faint but unmistakable, that he'd explained away as just the dry cleaners using something new. She had wanted so badly to believe him. Now, sitting in this hospital bed with 2 newborns beside her, she couldn't ignore it anymore. Her best friend, Tasha, arrived an hour later, rushing through the door with a bouquet of flowers and a wide smile that faded the second she saw Amara's face. "What happened?" Tasha asked, setting the flowers down and crossing the room quickly. "Marcus left," Amara said quietly. "For a work dinner. Except," her voice caught. There was a woman waiting for him in the hallway. In a yellow dress. She touched his arm like she'd done it 100 times before. Tasha's jaw tightened. She had never fully trusted Marcus. Not since the early days of the relationship, when she'd noticed the way he sometimes looked at other women even with Amara standing right beside him. But she had kept her concerns to herself, not wanting to plant doubt where there might be none. "Are you sure it wasn't a co-worker? Or someone from the investor dinner?" Tasha asked carefully, though her voice lacked real conviction. "I know what I saw, Tasha," Amara whispered. "And I know what I've been ignoring for months." Tasha sat on the edge of the bed and took her friend's hand. Okay. Let's not jump to conclusions tonight. You just gave birth. You need rest. We'll figure this out together. But right now, look at them. She nodded toward the twins. They need you calm. They need you strong. Amara looked at her children again, and something in her chest steadied, if only slightly. Tasha was right. Whatever storm was coming, her babies needed her to be steady enough to weather it. That night, after Tasha left and the hospital settled into its quiet nighttime rhythm, Amara lay awake listening to the soft breathing of her children. She thought about the early years with Marcus, how he used to call her just to hear her voice, how he used to show up to her office with lunch just because he missed her. When had that man disappeared? Or had he never really existed at all, just a mask worn by someone far more calculating? Around midnight, her phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. Dinner ran long. Investors want to close the deal tomorrow. Stayed at the office to finalize paperwork. Kiss the babies for me. Love you. Amara stared at the message for a long time. She thought about the woman in yellow, the hand on his arm, the way he hadn't even glanced back at his own children before walking out the door. She typed a reply, then deleted it. Typed again, then deleted it once more. Finally, she set the phone face down on the table and turned toward her sleeping children. I don't know what's happening, she whispered to them. But I promise you both, whatever it is, I will protect you. No matter what. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual nighttime energy, oblivious to the quiet storm building 14 floors up. Somewhere across town, in a penthouse suite overlooking the Atlanta skyline, Marcus Johnson sat across from the woman in the yellow dress, laughing over champagne, seemingly without a single thought for the family he had just left behind. But some truths don't stay buried forever. And this one was about to surface in a way that no one, not Amara, not Marcus, not even the woman in yellow, could have ever predicted. 3 days later, Amara was discharged from the hospital. Marcus had returned the next morning, full of apologies and gifts. A diamond bracelet, a bouquet so large it barely fit through the door, promises that the deal was finally closed and he could focus on his family now. Amara had accepted his apologies with a calm, unreadable expression, tucking her suspicions away for the right moment. She wasn't ready to confront him. Not yet. Not until she had proof. Back at their mansion in Buckhead, life resumed an uneasy rhythm. Marcus doted on the twins in front of the household staff, playing the role of devoted father whenever anyone was watching. But Amara noticed the late-night phone calls he took in his study with the door locked. She noticed the new cologne bottle in his gym bag that she hadn't bought him. She noticed everything now, because she had finally allowed herself to look. It was on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after the twins were born, that everything shattered completely. Amara had gone into Marcus's study to drop off some mail, something she rarely did, since he preferred his space kept private. His laptop sat open on the desk, still logged into his email from a video call he'd taken that morning. She hadn't meant to look, but a name on the screen caught her eye. Simone Carter, the woman from the hospital hallway. The name confirmed what her heart had already known. With trembling hands, Amara clicked into the email thread, and what she found stole the breath from her lungs. Simone wasn't just an affair. Simone was pregnant. 8 months pregnant, according to the emails, with a due date only weeks away. And in the emails, Marcus wasn't just having an affair. He was planning a future with her. Discussing a private, secluded home he was purchasing under a shell company. Discussing schools for the child. Discussing, Amara's stomach turned, plans to eventually divorce Amara, once the timing is right for the business, so as not to disrupt his upcoming merger with a hospitality conglomerate that valued family stability in their leadership. She wasn't a wife anymore in these messages. She was a liability to be managed. Amara sat frozen in the leather chair, reading message after message, each one peeling back another layer of the life she thought she had. Marcus had been living an entire second life. An apartment in Midtown, a car registered under Simone's name but paid for by one of his companies, even a joint bank account labeled simply, Family Fund 2. Her hands shook as she reached the most recent message, sent just that morning. Almost there, baby. Once the merger closes, I'll tell Amara everything. I just need a few more months to keep things stable. You and the baby are my real future. Promise. The words blurred through her tears. 8 years of marriage. 2 newborn children sleeping upstairs. And she was nothing more than an inconvenience standing between Marcus and the life he actually wanted. She heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly closed the laptop. Her heart pounding as Marcus walked in, loosening his tie after a long day. "Hey," he said, surprised to see her there. "Everything okay?" Amara studied his face. The face she had loved for 8 years. The face that had lied to her for who knew how long. She thought about screaming. She thought about throwing the mail in her hands directly at him. But instead, she found a strength she didn't know she had. "Everything's fine," she said. Her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "I was just leaving this for you." She walked past him, out of the study, up the stairs to the nursery where her children slept peacefully, unaware that their entire world was about to change. Standing over their cribs, Amara made a decision. She wasn't going to scream. She wasn't going to beg. She wasn't going to let Marcus see her break. She was going to plan. Because now she understood something crucial. Marcus Johnson had built an empire out of careful, calculated moves. If she wanted to protect herself and her children, she would need to be just as careful, just as calculated. She thought of her own father, a small business owner who had taught her from childhood that quiet strength always outlasted loud anger. She thought of her law degree, the one she had set aside years ago to support Marcus's growing empire, the one that suddenly felt more important than it had in a very long time. That night, after Marcus fell asleep beside her, still believing his secret was safe, Amara lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind working through every detail of what she had discovered. She didn't know exactly what her next move would be. But she knew, with absolute certainty, that the woman who had walked into that study that afternoon was not the same woman who would walk out of this marriage. The weeks that followed tested every ounce of strength Amara had. She played her part perfectly. The devoted wife, the doting mother, the picture of a happy family whenever Marcus's business associates came to visit. But behind closed doors, she was building something Marcus didn't know existed. A case. She reached out quietly to an old law school friend, Renata Okafor, now one of Atlanta's most respected family law attorneys, known for handling high-profile, high-asset divorces with discretion and precision. "I need your help," Amara told her over coffee at a small cafe far from Buckhead, where no one would recognize her. "But I need you to understand. My husband is powerful. He has resources, connections, lawyers on retainer who specialize in making problems disappear. If we do this, we do it right, or we don't do it at all." Renata studied her old friend carefully. "Tell me everything." Amara laid out what she'd found. The emails, the second apartment, Simone Carter, the pregnancy, the shell company, the Family Fund 2 account. Renata's expression grew more serious with every detail. "This is good," Renata said finally. "I mean, it's terrible, obviously. But legally, this is very good for you. Adultery, financial concealment, potentially fraudulent asset transfers if he's been hiding money in shell companies. Georgia is an equitable distribution state, and judges do not look kindly on this kind of deception, especially with young children involved." "I don't want a war," Amara said quietly. "I just want to protect Zuri and Malik. I want them to have a mother who isn't broken by the time this is over." Renata reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Then let's make sure you walk away from this stronger than you've ever been." Over the following weeks, Amara worked with Renata in secret, gathering documents, opening a private bank account, quietly consulting with a forensic accountant to trace the full scope of Marcus's hidden assets. It was exhausting, terrifying work, done in stolen moments while the twins napped, while Marcus was at the office, while the house was empty except for her and her resolve. Meanwhile, Marcus grew more confident, more careless. He believed Amara suspected nothing. He began spending more nights at the office. He grew short-tempered when she asked innocent questions about his schedule. He didn't notice that his wife had grown quieter not because she was breaking, but because she was calculating. Then, one evening in late spring, everything accelerated in a way no one had anticipated. Amara received a call from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something told her to. "Is this Amara Johnson?" A woman's voice asked, shaky and uncertain. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Simone Carter." Amara's entire body went cold. She gripped the kitchen counter to steady herself. "I know this is strange," Simone continued, her voice trembling. "But I think we need to talk. I think Marcus has been lying to both of us." Over the next hour, Amara learned something she hadn't expected. Simone hadn't known about Amara and the twins. Not really. Marcus had told her he was already separated, living apart from his wife for over a year, only staying on paper married for business reasons related to the upcoming merger. Simone had believed she was the future, not the other woman. She had found out the truth only recently, when a mutual acquaintance mentioned Marcus's happy family at a charity gala. The same charity gala, Amara realized, that she herself had attended just weeks after giving birth, smiling for photos beside a husband who had been living an entirely different life in the shadows. "He's been lying to both of us," Simone said, her voice breaking. "I'm due in 3 weeks. And I don't even know who this man really is anymore." For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Two lives, torn apart by the same lies, connected now by a shared, devastating truth. "I'm not your enemy," Amara finally said. "But I think we both need to protect ourselves now. Whatever happens next, our children didn't ask for any of this." That phone call changed everything. It wasn't Marcus's carelessness that would ultimately expose him. It was the two women he had betrayed, quietly finding common ground in the wreckage he had left behind. Amara hung up the phone, sat down at her kitchen table, and for the first time since the twins were born, allowed herself to cry. Not out of weakness, but out of the sheer release of finally understanding the full shape of the storm she was standing in. Then she wiped her eyes, picked up her phone, and called Renata. "It's time," she said. "Let's move forward." The plan Amara and Renata built together was careful, deliberate, and airtight. Rather than confronting Marcus immediately, Amara continued her quiet life at home, gathering the final pieces of evidence needed to ensure that when she finally filed, there would be no way for Marcus to hide behind his lawyers, his money, or his charm. Simone, still reeling from her own betrayal, agreed, cautiously, to share select information that corroborated the financial concealment Amara's forensic accountant had already uncovered. It wasn't out of spite. It was out of a shared understanding that Marcus had used both of them, each unaware of the other, as pieces in his own carefully constructed game. During this time, Amara found herself leaning more and more on her mother, Diane, who flew in from Charlotte to help with the twins. Diane had never fully trusted Marcus, though she'd never voiced it strongly, not wanting to interfere in her daughter's marriage. "You've always been stronger than you know," Diane told her one evening, rocking baby Zuri gently while Amara pumped and stored milk in the kitchen. "Your father used to say that about you when you were just a girl. Quiet, but unbreakable." "I don't feel unbreakable," Amara admitted. "I feel like I'm barely holding it together." "That's exactly what unbreakable feels like sometimes," Diane said softly. "It's not about not feeling the pain, sweetheart. It's about carrying it and still moving forward anyway." Those words stayed with Amara through the difficult weeks that followed. Marcus, still unaware of the storm building around him, grew increasingly distracted by the upcoming merger, a $300 million deal that would solidify his company's dominance in luxury hospitality development across the Southeast. He spent long hours in meetings, occasionally coming home late, smelling faintly of unfamiliar perfume, offering excuses that Amara now simply nodded along to, no longer bothering to challenge them. She was playing the long game now. One night, as Marcus prepared for a business trip to New York, Amara noticed him packing an extra suit, not the charcoal gray one typically reserved for investor meetings, but a lighter, more casual navy blazer. "Business trip?" she asked casually. "Yeah, just meetings," he said without looking up. "Back in 3 days." She already knew, thanks to information quietly passed along from Simone, that Marcus wasn't going to New York for business at all. He was going because Simone's due date had arrived early, and despite everything, some fractured part of him still felt obligated to be there for the birth of his third child. Amara said nothing. She simply kissed him goodbye, watched him walk out the door with his suitcase, and turned back toward her sleeping twins with a strange, steady calm settling over her. The following morning she called Renata. "He's out of town," Amara said. "This is our window." Within 48 hours, with Renata's guidance, Amara filed for divorce, citing adultery and financial misconduct, while simultaneously securing a temporary restraining order on the couple's joint assets to prevent Marcus from moving funds before the case could proceed. The forensic accountant's report, detailed and precise, was submitted alongside the petition, outlining nearly $4 million funneled into shell companies and hidden accounts over the past 18 months. It was a move designed not out of anger, but out of necessity, a mother protecting her children's future with the same precision Marcus had used to try to protect his secrets. When Marcus returned from New York, exhausted and emotionally raw from the complicated birth of his third child, he was met not with the quiet home he expected, but with legal documents waiting for him on the kitchen counter, delivered that morning by a process server. He stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the papers, then up at Amara, who sat calmly at the kitchen table, Malik asleep in her arms. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice sharp with disbelief. "It's the truth, Marcus," Amara said quietly. "Something you seem to have forgotten how to tell." For the first time in their entire relationship, Marcus Johnson had absolutely nothing to say. The days following the divorce filing were chaotic. Marcus, blindsided and furious, immediately called in his own team of high-powered attorneys, determined to fight the allegations and protect his assets. He accused Amara of overreacting, of not understanding the complexities of business, of trying to destroy everything he had built. But Renata had prepared for exactly this kind of resistance. "He can be as angry as he wants," she told Amara during one of their strategy sessions. "But the paper trail doesn't lie. Shell companies, undisclosed accounts, a second household funded with marital assets. None of that disappears just because he's upset." Still, the emotional toll on Amara was immense. Word began to spread through Atlanta's tight-knit social circles. Whispers at the country club. Sideways glances at the grocery store. A local business blog even ran a small piece speculating about trouble in paradise for the Johnsons, though it stopped short of revealing specifics. Amara found herself grateful for Tasha's steady presence, for her mother's quiet strength, and increasingly, for the fragile, unexpected friendship growing between her and Simone. Simone, now a new mother herself to a baby girl named Harmony, reached out again a few weeks after the birth. "I know this is strange," Simone said during one of their phone calls. "But I don't have anyone else who really understands what I'm going through right now. My family doesn't approve of any of this. And Marcus, he's been distant since the divorce filing. I think he's more worried about the business than about either of us." Amara listened, surprised by how much compassion she still had left to give, even after everything. "You didn't know about me," she said. "You were lied to just as much as I was. Different circumstances, but the same man." Over time, an unlikely alliance formed. Not close friendship exactly, but a mutual respect between two women who had both been deceived by the same charming, calculating man, and who both now understood that the truth mattered more than pride. Marcus, meanwhile, grew increasingly desperate. With the divorce proceedings threatening to expose the full scope of his financial misconduct, just as his $300 million merger was finalizing, his business partners began to grow uneasy. Word of the lawsuit, despite efforts to keep it quiet, had reached the ears of the hospitality conglomerate overseeing the deal, a company that, ironically, prided itself publicly on family values branding. 2 weeks before the merger was set to close, Marcus's lead investor called an emergency meeting. "We can't move forward with this deal while there's active litigation involving fraud allegations," the investor said bluntly. "Our board won't approve it. Not with this kind of exposure." Marcus tried to argue, to reassure them it was merely a personal matter, but the damage was already done. The very empire he had risked his marriage, his integrity, and his family to protect began crumbling beneath the weight of his own deception. At home, Amara received updates from Renata about the merger's collapse with a strange, complicated mixture of emotions. She hadn't set out to destroy Marcus's business. She had only wanted to protect her children. But there was an undeniable quiet justice in watching a man who had prioritized wealth and image over his own family lose the very thing he had sacrificed everything for. One evening, Marcus showed up unannounced at the house, disheveled, his usual polished confidence completely gone. "You destroyed everything," he said, standing in the doorway, his voice hoarse. "The merger fell through. My investors are pulling out. Do you understand what you've done?" Amara stood calmly in the foyer, Zuri resting against her shoulder. "I didn't destroy anything, Marcus. You did that yourself, the moment you decided our marriage, our children, and the truth meant less to you than money and power." Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. For the first time since she'd known him, Amara saw something in his eyes she never expected to see. Fear. Not of losing his business, not of losing his money, but fear of finally facing, for the very first time, exactly who he had become. In the months that followed, life slowly began to find a new rhythm. The divorce proceedings continued, methodical and thorough, with Renata ensuring that Amara and the twins were protected both financially and emotionally throughout the process. Marcus, facing mounting pressure from every direction, eventually agreed to a settlement rather than risk a prolonged, increasingly public court battle. The terms were more than fair to Amara and the children, a small but meaningful measure of justice after everything that had happened. Amara used part of the settlement to do something she had dreamed about for years but had always set aside for Marcus's ambitions. She enrolled in a program to complete her long-abandoned law degree, determined to build a career of her own, something entirely separate from the empire Marcus had built and nearly destroyed. "I always wondered what happened to that fire in you," her mother said one afternoon, watching Amara study late into the night, Zuri and Malik asleep in their bassinets nearby. "The girl who used to argue every point in her college debate class. I missed her." "She's still here," Amara said softly, smiling for the first time in what felt like months. "She just needed time to remember who she was." Simone, too, began rebuilding her own life, moving to a smaller apartment closer to her sister's family, determined to raise harmony with the kind of honesty and stability she herself had been denied. She and Amara continued their unusual friendship, occasionally meeting for coffee, their children unknowingly growing up as half-siblings who would one day understand a complicated, painful history neither of their mothers had chosen for them. Marcus, for his part, seemed to shrink in the aftermath of everything. The merger, once the crown jewel of his career, fell apart completely, taking a significant portion of his reputation and business relationships down with it. He remained wealthy. Men like Marcus rarely lost everything, but the empire he had once ruled with effortless confidence was now a fraction of what it had been, rebuilt slowly, quietly, without the same swagger that had once defined him. He requested visitation with the twins, and after careful consideration and legal guidance, Amara agreed, believing, despite everything, that Zuri and Malik deserved the chance to know their father, on carefully structured, supervised terms that protected their well-being above all else. Their first supervised visit took place in a quiet park near Amara's new home, a modest but beautiful house she had purchased entirely with her own resources, a symbol of the independence she had fought so hard to reclaim. Marcus arrived alone, dressed simply. None of the flashy confidence of the man who had once walked into that hospital room in a designer suit, distracted by his phone even as his children were born. He knelt beside the stroller, looking at Zuri and Malik, now 6 months old, giggling and reaching for the sunlight filtering through the trees. "They're beautiful," he said quietly. His voice thick with an emotion Amara hadn't seen from him in a long time. "I missed so much already." "You did," Amara said, not unkindly, simply honest. "But you have a chance now to be present for the rest. That's up to you." Marcus looked up at her, something raw and unguarded in his expression. "I don't know how to say this without sounding like I'm making excuses. But I am sorry, Amara. Not because I got caught. Because I lost something I didn't even realize how much I valued until it was gone." Amara studied him for a long moment. The anger she had carried for months had softened into something steadier. Not forgiveness exactly, but a quiet peace that came from no longer needing his validation or his apology to feel whole. "I hope you figure it out, Marcus," she said. "For their sake and for yours. But I'm not the woman who's going to wait around to see if you do." She turned back to her children, lifting Malik into her arms as he reached for her. And for the first time in a very long time, Amara Johnson felt something she had almost forgotten was possible. A year passed. Amara finished her law degree with honors, graduating in a ceremony attended by her mother, Tasha, and, surprising even herself, Simone, who had become one of the steadiest friendships in her new life. The twins, now toddlers, sat in the audience with their grandmother, clapping enthusiastically at all the wrong moments, drawing warm laughter from the crowd. She accepted a position at a respected family law firm downtown, drawn to the work not out of coincidence, but out of a genuine desire to help other women navigate the same painful, complicated situations she had once faced alone. Her first major case came just months into the job. A young mother, blindsided by her husband's hidden second life, eerily similar to Amara's own story. Sitting across from the woman in her office, watching the same fear and confusion Amara herself had once felt reflected back at her, she felt a quiet, powerful sense of purpose settle into place. "I know this feels impossible right now," Amara told her gently. "But I promise you, it's not the end of your story. It's just a very painful chapter in it." The woman looked up at her, tears in her eyes. "How do you know that?" Amara smiled softly. "Because I've lived it." Meanwhile, Marcus continued working to rebuild both his business and his relationship with his children. The visits became more consistent, more meaningful, and though Amara remained cautious, guarding her heart and her children's well-being carefully, she began to see genuine effort in him. Therapy sessions he mentioned, a noticeable absence of the arrogance that had once defined him, a quieter, more reflective version of the man she had once loved. He never fully explained what had driven him to risk everything the way he had. The affair, the hidden accounts, the double life. But in one of their calmer conversations, arranging a birthday party for the twins, he offered Amara a glimpse of understanding. "I think I got so caught up in building something impressive that I forgot to actually build something real," he admitted. "I thought success meant never stopping, never being satisfied. I didn't realize what it was costing me until I'd already lost it." Amara didn't offer forgiveness in that moment. Not fully. Some wounds take longer to heal than others. But she offered something perhaps more valuable. Understanding without excusing, and the quiet dignity of moving forward without bitterness weighing down every step. On the twins' second birthday, held in the backyard of Amara's home with balloons, a small bounce house, and both grandmothers fussing over the birthday cake, Marcus arrived with gifts and, for the first time, without any trace of the distracted urgency that had once defined every interaction with his family. He knelt down as Zuri and Malik ran toward him, laughing, arms outstretched, and for a brief, unguarded moment, Amara watched a father truly present with his children, not performing for cameras or business associates, not distracted by his phone, simply there. It wasn't the life she had once imagined for her family, but it was, in its own complicated way, a version of healing that felt honest. Simone arrived a little later with Harmony, now walking confidently on unsteady toddler legs, and the two little girls, half-sisters who would grow up understanding their unconventional beginning with age-appropriate honesty rather than secrecy, played together in the grass while their mothers watched from the porch, a quiet testament to how far both women had come. "Did you ever imagine this?" Simone asked, watching the children play. "Any of this?" Amara shook her head, smiling faintly. "Not in a million years. But I think this is better than what I imagined. It's real." 3 years after that devastating night in the hospital, Amara stood in the courtroom of a case that would, unknowingly, echo the very beginning of her own story. She was representing a young mother named Keisha, whose husband, much like Marcus once had built an elaborate second life hidden behind wealth, charm, and carefully constructed lies. The case was difficult, emotionally exhausting, and deeply personal in ways that only Amara truly understood. During closing arguments, she found herself speaking not just as an attorney, but as a woman who had once sat exactly where her client now sat, terrified, betrayed, uncertain if she would ever feel whole again. "My client did not choose this situation," Amara said, her voice steady and clear before the judge. "She did not choose the lies, the hidden accounts, or the deception that shattered her family. But what she has chosen, every single day since discovering the truth, is to protect her children, to rebuild her life with dignity, and to refuse to let someone else's betrayal define who she becomes. That resilience deserves to be recognized and protected by this court." The case was decided in Keisha's favor, securing not only fair financial settlement but full custody protections for her children. Outside the courtroom, Keisha hugged Amara tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You didn't just fight for me. You believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." "That's because I've been exactly where you are," Amara said softly. "And I promise you, this isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of a much stronger one." That evening, Amara picked up Zuri and Malik from her mother's house, now energetic, curious 5-year-olds who filled every room with questions and laughter. As they climbed into the car, chattering excitedly about their day at the park, Amara caught sight of her reflection in the rearview mirror. Steady, confident, undeniably transformed from the woman who had once lain in that hospital bed, shattered by betrayal. Marcus had rebuilt a smaller, more modest version of his business, one built on far more careful, transparent practices than before. He remained a present, involved father, attending school events, coaching Malik's little league team, developing a genuine relationship with his children built on honesty rather than performance. He and Amara had settled into a respectful, cooperative co-parenting relationship. Not the marriage they once had, but something steadier, healthier, rooted in mutual accountability rather than illusion. Simone had gone back to school herself, pursuing a degree in early childhood education, determined to build a stable, honest life for Harmony, who remained close with her half-siblings, the 3 children forming a genuine, uncomplicated bond that transcended the complicated circumstances of their beginning. One quiet evening, as Amara tucked Zuri and Malik into bed, her daughter looked up at her with the innocent curiosity only a child could offer. "Mommy, were you ever scared?" Zuri asked. "Like really, really scared?" Amara smiled softly, brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead. "Yes, baby. I was very scared once." "What happened?" Amara thought for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. "I learned that being scared doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're brave enough to keep going, even when things feel really hard. And when I was scared, I remembered that I had you and your brother to be strong for. That gave me all the courage I needed." Zuri considered this with a serious concentration only a 5-year-old could muster, then smiled and hugged her mother tightly. "I'm glad you were brave, Mommy." "Me too, sweetheart," Amara whispered, holding her daughter close. "Me too." 5 years after the night everything changed, Amara stood at a podium in a downtown Atlanta banquet hall, accepting an award for her pro bono work supporting survivors of financial abuse and infidelity-related divorce cases. Women who, like her, had discovered devastating betrayals in the midst of what should have been the happiest moments of their lives. The room was filled with familiar faces. Tasha, now married with children of her own, beaming proudly from the front row. Her mother, Diane, dabbing at tears of pride. Renata, the attorney who had guided her through the darkest period of her life, now a close friend and mentor. Even Simone sat in the audience, Harmony beside her, now a bright, articulate 8-year-old who idolized her older half-siblings. And near the back of the room, quietly, respectfully, sat Marcus. Not as her husband, not as the man who had once broken her heart in the cruelest way imaginable, but simply as the father of her children, there to support the woman who had built an extraordinary life out of the wreckage he had once left behind. 5 years ago, Amara began, her voice steady despite the emotion rising in her chest. I sat in a hospital bed, holding my newborn twins, watching my husband walk out the door to be with another woman. I felt like my entire world had ended. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and utterly alone. She paused, scanning the room, meeting the eyes of the women in the audience who understood exactly what those feelings meant. But that night wasn't the end of my story. It was the painful beginning of a much stronger one. I learned that betrayal doesn't have to define you. That the deepest heartbreak can become the foundation for the most meaningful purpose. And most importantly, I learned that no matter how dark a moment feels, you are always more resilient than you believe. She looked toward Zuri and Malik, now seated proudly beside their grandmother, watching their mother with wide, admiring eyes. To every woman in this room who has ever felt broken by someone else's choices, I want you to know something. Your story is not over. Whatever chapter you're living through right now, no matter how painful, does not have to be the ending. You have the strength within you to rebuild, to heal, and to create something even more beautiful than what you lost. The room erupted in applause, many in the audience wiping away tears, moved not just by her words, but by the undeniable truth of a woman who had turned unimaginable pain into unshakable purpose. After the ceremony, as the crowd began to disperse, Amara found a quiet moment on the balcony overlooking the Atlanta skyline, the same city where, 5 years earlier, her entire world had fallen apart in a hospital room high above these very streets. Zuri and Malik ran up to her, wrapping their arms around her waist. "We're so proud of you, Mommy," Malik said, looking up at her with earnest, admiring eyes. Amara knelt down, pulling both her children into a tight embrace, tears finally falling freely down her cheeks. Not tears of pain, but tears of hard-won peace. "I'm proud of us," she whispered, holding them close. "All 3 of us." As she stood, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, Amara realized something profound. The night that had once felt like the absolute end of everything had actually been the beginning of the truest, strongest version of herself. Life doesn't always give us the story we expect. Sometimes it breaks us down to our very foundation, only to rebuild something far more resilient, far more meaningful in its place. If this story touched your heart today, please take a moment to like this video. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story like this one. And if you know someone who needs to hear a story of strength, resilience, and hope today, please share this with them. You never know whose life you might touch. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. Until next time, take care of yourselves and remember, no matter how dark the chapter, your story isn't over yet.